welcome to episode 350 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and you might notice that it is cold and flu season here on the east coast of North America. So my dulcet tones might be slightly different than usual, but I am super excited to be sharing our 350th episode with you. And for our multiple of 50 episodes, we always try to do something a little special, and we are doing exactly that for you today. But before we go into explaining it, let's introduce the rest of the panel, starting with Wes Iliff.
Hey, everybody.
And Mike Salbato.
Hello, I am here.
And Zach Wilkerson.
Hello.
And making a triumphant return to Retro Encounter, Alana Hagues.
Hello.
Oh, it's so great to hear from all four of you, Wes, Mike, Zach, Alana. We are gathered here today to have not exactly a quiz show episode, because, I mean, if there's one of many things you know about me, it's that I love quiz shows, but that doesn't mean just quiz shows where you keep score and there's winners and losers. I also like quiz shows that are just more about the experience. We're talking about panel shows, like in the UK you have news quizzes like Have I Got News for You, and fact quizzes like Quite Interesting. The only American panel show like I know of that stripe that I know of is Wait Don't Tell Me, but they do a pretty good job as well. But I am sort of borrowing that format to a degree, not to write a bunch of quiz questions, although I have done that as well, but more just to get some interesting discussion out of this out of episode 350. I have written a dozen questions, and which will hopefully lead to 12 interesting discussions. The questions aren't necessarily fact-based. Sometimes they're more like observations or shower thoughts. and I'm definitely not going to keep score. But yeah, I have 12 questions, and I am eager to share them with you. So what do you say? Should we just get started, or do you want to talk about UK panel shows some more?
I'll say,
I'm up for whatever.
Yes. I could do both, but we should dive in.
I was going to say, let's go.
Okay, well, first of all, this isn't one of the 12, but Stephen Fry or Sandy Tolksvig?
Stephen Fry.
Yeah, I love both of them.
It's a hard one. It's
a really hard one. They both did and do such a good job. I think Stephen Fry will always be QI to me, and Sandy Toksvig's done so many other things, but she's such a great panelist when she's on it as well.
Yeah, she was like one of the best panelists when Fry was the
always.
host, and then she's just an excellent host in her own right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Stephen Fry, but if he needed a replacement, Sandy Toksvig was the right choice.
Correct, yeah. You can't go wrong.
And for the record, my favorite panelist other than those two is probably Phil Jupitus. But you sort of get to know the UK like presenter and comedian circle if you watch a lot of QI.
You certainly do.
All right, but let's go to these questions now. I have 12 categories here, and I will read them quickly once, and then we'll have you select them one by one. We'll get to all 12, but just to mix around the order and have a little fun with it, we'll let you choose in just the order that I have in my chat window right now. So the 12 categories are Massive, Konami, Survey, Blade, Space, Super Nintendo, Monster, Map, Podcast, Falcom, Soul, and Switzerland. The last one's maybe the oddest of the bunch, but trust me, all 12 of those get sort of odd and go in an unexpected place. So, Wes, because you're just first on my list here, which question would you like first?
I think we need to go somewhere that is yet uncorrupted by capitalism. Space.
Well done.
Space. Now, this question involves Mass Effect. What do Final Fantasy VI and Mass Effect 2 have in common?
Oh my god.
Just throw out your answers. No one's buzzing in. If you have an idea, say it.
They're both lose RPGs. Half your party.
Correct, Zach, but not what I'm looking for. What did you say?
You lose half your party if you're not careful?
No, but
you're
on
the right track. Yeah,
characters can
permanently die if you do things, make certain choices.
That is also true, but not exactly what I'm looking for. But you are right. You
Oh!
are right in that it's about the characters.
In that zone.
The characters are good.
Also, also correct. I'm looking for a verb and a number if possible, if that helps.
Wow.
Oh, this is so unfair.
14.
Are there 14 characters?
That's correct. Both games have 14 playable characters, and
Oh, my
goodness.
and most of the story is recruiting all 14. Because in the second half of Final Fantasy VI, you start with just one, and you have to recruit the other up to 13 to join your party permanently. And in Mass Effect 2, you start out as a shepherd long believed dead, and you have to recruit the ultimate team for the ultimate mission. It's I think it's sort of amazing that you have a 90s classic and a modern classic in FF6 and Mass Effect 2. I'm not going to accept opinions to the contrary, sorry. And both of them have the weird coincidence about being about character recruitment and having 14 of them, even though in Mass Effect in 2 you can only have 13 at once because Morinth is a special gal, let's say. Wes knows where I'm coming from.
Yes.
But so what do you think about that? I think that both of those games have really strong casts, in part because they seem unusually large, but have like unusually good attention to all of them. I don't think there's a weak link in the entire FF6 cast, even though Umaro has like 4 lines of dialogue.
Yeah, I was sitting here
but-
trying to
but it's
figure out if there was a
unique.
Yeti in each one.
Right.
I thought that was the connection.
Well, I mean, Grunt.
Grunt, I was
Grunt is kind of...
Grunt is the closest.
If there were Yetis in the Mass Effect universe, they would be the Krogan.
Yes.
Okay, so there is another connection.
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, all of us have played Final Fantasy VI, and I think some of us have played Mass Effect 2. I mean, isn't it more fun when, like, you get characters joining your party as quest rewards, and like the more you play the game, the more you get out of the characters. I really feel like those two games are similar in that regard.
Each one's impressive in how it manages such a ridiculously large cast and actually lets you use everyone in some way, shape, or form throughout the game.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
You've
think
got those
I think
loyalty
that's-
quests in Mass Effect, and you've got multi-party split dungeons in FF6, both of which force you to use characters you might not always use.
when I first played the loyalty missions in Mass Effect 2, it would have been 2011, I think. I wanted them in every kind of game, in like every RPG. It was like just character specific quests with distinct rewards and a lot of good dialogue and having you feel closer to the cast as a result. I just love them, and we will talk about them in detail in a few weeks when we have our Mass Effect 2 episode.
Yeah, I can't think of a lot of games. I haven't played Mass Effect 2, but you continually are selling it. I can't think of a lot of games that do that. I mean, like the last 2 Xenoblade games both had like character specific quests that worked really well. And I feel like even though Final Fantasy VI doesn't have that, like it feels that way. You know what I mean? And so I think that's one of the things that allows both of them to work so effectively, I'm guessing, at least in terms of Mass Effect 2.
I mean that's basically true, but FF6 does have a recruitment arc for every character in the second half of the game, and for some of them also the first half of the game.
Right.
And then each character has something to do after you recruit them, whether it's Gao meeting his father, or Strago fighting Haidon, or like Realm learning about her heritage. Like there's
Stuff with Locke is really good.
Locke in the Phoenix Cave is excellent.
Yeah.
There's I think that there is a connection in recruitment and character driven quests between FF6 and Mass Effect 2. But again, that's one that's less a fact and more just an observation that I had while I was playing a lot of Mass Effect in 2022. That was a more timely than usual question.
I was just saying, it's a good one. I didn't realize, I never would have thought of that connection. So I don't know Mass Effect 2. I just know Final Fantasy 6, but I think it's important too to have a cast that big and everyone actually, even though you don't have to use everyone outside of certain things, like everyone's there like for a reason. None of them are throwaway characters, which some RPGs do have bigger casts, but some of them do nothing. Like they don't have development or any reason to be
Chrono
there.
Cross, anyone?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
45 characters in that one, which is maybe a little too rich for my blood. But anyway,
Hey, there's a lot of pathos in that skeleton clown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my second favorite RPG clown named Skelly, in fact.
Hey.
All right, but thank you very much for exploring some Mass Effect 2 with me. Zach, you're next on the list. Which category would you like to try next?
Let's go. Speaking of games with large character casts, Konami.
Konami. Oh, you thought this might be a Suikoden question, but maybe not.
I know. Oh well.
What was the first Konami project that Metal Gear creator Hideo Kojima and Castlevania director Koji Igarashi worked on together?
It's Tokimeki Memorial.
It sure is.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yep, this is something I know. We've talked about it at length multiple times, but it's
I
just
think
one of
we
those
probably
wonderful
have.
coincidences.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
Koji Igarashi was a programmer on the PS1 and Saturn versions of the first Tokimeki Memorial, and Hideo Kojima did not work on the original version, but he did do script writing for the drama CDs of that game before Metal Gear Solid came out. So yes, they were in before Lords of Shadow happened. Kojima and Igarashi worked on Konami's 90s student dating sim. Which has me ask the question, how about them dating sims? Because I don't know about you guys, but like I've seen over the years more dating sim elements enter JRPGs in particular, like maybe Persona most obviously, but also I went from like not knowing what an otome game is to seeing like 3 otome games come out every year. It seems like it's like the dating sim genre used to be such a niche that it was considered almost weird or deviant, and now they're everywhere, and some of them are really, really good.
I feel like there's like 3 Otome games a week.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
as like Nikki and Audra are always like reviewing them. I'm like, oh, there's another Otome game.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, when we did the Hakuoki episodes of Retro Encounter last year, I think Nikki and Audra were both on those episodes. Like when I was editing the episode and doing some background googling of Hakuoki,
Oh no.
I didn't realize there was like 8 versions of it that all mostly tell the same story but remade or expanded. And it's like I didn't realize just how deep the Hakuoki rabbit hole went. And it's not just that case for Hakuoki. Like there's a bunch of the most popular dating sim games that have really dedicated fan bases and multiple versions across multiple consoles. It's the world of otome games is broader and deeper than I ever thought it was, and I only know that because I work at an RPG website sometimes and hear about these otome games a lot, which also makes me think I need to get off my ass and play one of these for real sometime. But I do have a copy of Code Realized for PS4 ready to go at a moment's notice.
Okay, so at least you have a starting place, because if
Yes.
you didn't, I wouldn't even know where to start with that.
Don't be surprised if that's a Retro Encounter episode sometime next year when I get around to playing it. Have any of the 4 of you played more otome games than I have? Have any recommendations for me?
I've played the exact number that you have.
I was gonna say I've only really played 1 and 2, and I've only ever done them for review or just out of curiosity. And I might even be the wrong person to ask, but like, they always stand out for some of the more troubling reasons more often than not. Like, I think I reviewed Amnesia Memories back when it came out as a PS Vita game, and I just want to say, like, the PS Vita is where like the otome really started to like pop out, and then like since the Switch, like that's where I see like 4 a week. I'm like, hang on, like what's this? Like even if it's just like a small indie one or anything like that. Amnesia is good, but it's got like a few troubling relationships.
Isn't that the one that's mostly gaslighting?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But yeah, I've heard the drama CD that came out recently, or the additional episode, is actually pretty good. But yeah, I wouldn't really know where to start, and I'm one of these people who kind of has problems with some of the dating elements they try and stick into RPGs nowadays, because it just sometimes seems to override a lot of different things, and also again latches onto some of the more troublesome tropes, I think, with relationships in video games. And I know like Persona is mostly good about this, the teacher notwithstanding, because I hate that whole relationship. I hate it. But Persona 5, and yeah, I feel like more often than not, and maybe this is just me with my cold steel, tired, jaded with relationship systems. Just like, I'm way more interested in canon relationships than RPGs, and so many of them don't commit to one and let it be free reign for you, that I'm sort of more like, just give it to, just give me what you want. Give me your vision. I don't care about what I think, unless you're wrong. Like, that's all I care about.
Yeah, it's a little weird because I love romance and RPGs 10 times out of 10. But when there's a dating system, sometimes it's like they're treating their characters more like vending machines where you put time in and then love comes out. But like if they use it just to give, some player directed lots of one-on-one dialogue with that's not necessarily romantic, because
Yeah.
again, there's only a couple romance routes in the Persona games. Like a lot of the time that's pretty good, but I don't know, like I think maybe if RPGs that had dating in them were less preoccupied with it, I would like that more. I'm really giving a hard side eye to Fire Emblem here.
Yeah.
But in general, like I just think it's interesting that dating sim and RPG have crossed over so clearly many times in the past, I don't know, 15 years, or probably, if you want to go back to like Thousand Arms, more like 20 years.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Neil, number one Thousand Arm fans. He has the main character of Thousand Arms as an avatar a lot of the time. But anyway, we are not doing a retro encounter episode on Thousand Arms anytime soon. Alana, pick another category from the list.
Oh, okay. Well, since it's looking at me, survey feels like a strange one, so let's get that one off.
Okay, now this is one of the more ultra specific ones. I was looking up like top 10 RPG polls done by Japanese readers or of magazines and websites, and the earliest one I found was in 2005 by Famitsu. And I think I vaguely remembered reading this at the time when I would have been like end of high school, beginning of college. And the top 10 was entirely RPGs,
Yeah.
except for one game. It was 4 Final Fantasy games. FF10 was number 1 overall. 3 Dragon Quest games. The original Tactics Ogre. 1 Zelda game, Ocarina of Time, and 1 visual novel, rounding up the top 10. So, in 2005, what was the most popular Japanese visual novel at the time?
Oh my god.
Based on this 2005 survey.
How old is Steins Gate actually?
Steins
Not
Gate
that
came
old.
out a couple years later, and when I looked up later polls on the best visual novels collected by Famitsu, Steins Gate was number 1, and this game was still in the top 5.
Oh,
I have a couple of thoughts, but I want to see if anyone else has got any ideas.
See,
I like how we snuck into visual novels twice in a row.
I know.
Yeah, whoops.
You found the 2 visual novel questions. Congratulations. Both of them.
Did it come out in English?
It did not come out in English, which is part of why I'm fascinated by this game. Like, why haven't I been able to play it yet?
It hasn't
Princess
come out
Maker.
in English.
It is not Princess Maker. It has not come out in English, but here's another hint. Its sequel has.
Oh, shoot.
I know I'm going to know the name.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I know.
I have a feeling that all of us have probably heard this name around before. But
Are there Fate games kicking around here? Do those count? Fate Stay Night, Fate, whatever.
It probably
Yeah.
would. It probably would count. I think that is before 2005, but it's not the right answer.
Ah, shame.
Man, before you said it was something that hadn't come out in English, I was going to say it was something
All right,
like
you get-
Clannad. Or
It's not
but
that
it's
one.
not, yeah.
You get one last hint. It was on the Sega Saturn.
Oh, God. No, have we already said it?
No, we have not. I'll just give it to you. It's Machi.
Okay.
Machi is a cult hit Saturn visual novel where you're given a map of Shibuya, which is a trendy district of downtown Tokyo, and you choose basically different places to visit at certain times, and you overhear with full vocal performances people talking in conversation at those places, and you try to uncover and solve a mystery, like by just exploring Shibuya and listening to different people talk. It had a spiritual sequel many years later called 428 Shibuya Scramble.
Yeah,
Oh.
the minute you started
Oh.
saying it was about listening to people, people described 428 Shibuya Scrabble as a sound novel, and I was like,
Yes.
yeah, this is what you're talking about.
Machi's sort of the original sound novel.
I didn't know
But
there
Yeah.
was a game before that.
yeah,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it had but the way it was presented, it almost feels like an FMV game without the video, because you are just
Yes.
encountering canned dialogue and just trying to get things from the dialogue. I guess it sort of reminds me of games like Her Story or Telling Lives, because it is a dialogue puzzle of sorts. And when I first heard about this game years ago and was aware of it being really popular, I was a little fascinated by it. There are somewhat crude English translations out there with the Japanese dialogue intact, but if it had a real release in English, I would definitely check it out. But I have not checked it out on my own. So has anyone here at least played 428? Because that's a game that I got on sale years ago but haven't touched.
Oh, I adore that game. That's one of my all-time favorites.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic visual novel. You'll recognize a few of the people in it. This is a Sollosi actor heavy game.
Oh no. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
That means
that means
Tokusatsu actors.
Yeah,
lots of tokusatsu
that
actors.
definitely means Kamen Rider actors. I gotcha. Okay.
It does. Yeah.
Now I have to
Oh.
look at that cast much more closely. But in that visual novel poll in the early 2010s that I mentioned, the top 5 were Steins Gate number 1, then I think 428 Shibuya Scramble was number 2, and the last 3 were Machi, the first Danganronpa, and the first Ace Attorney. So those were the ones that the fans paid attention to the most by the early 2010s. But if you want to look at more Japanese polls, there was a very recent one at the end of 2021 that was the largest poll of its kind taken in history. It was done by a Japanese TV station and had over 50,000 respondents, so it was about as deep a sample size as you can get. And Breath of the Wild was number 1 overall, and Machi did not show up in the entire 100. So
Oh.
Japanese game polls, they get a little weird. You don't need to put a lot of stock in them, but they're fun to read and report on. Because, whenever a poll of some news organization shows up, I know RPG Fan has shared them before, so they're at least of interest to us sometimes. But I have a poll for you, Mike. What is the next category you want to hear?
I'm gonna pick Super Nintendo because I'm predictable like that.
All right. Well, I lied a little bit. This isn't exactly about the Super Nintendo.
Oh no.
It's about the Super Famicom. What was the last Super Famicom game released as a physical cartridge? It is an RPG, and it had music in an episode of Rhythm Encounter earlier this year.
Trials of Mana?
No.
I think there's one of two. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm gonna go look at the episode of Rhythm Encounter.
Was it Tales of Fantasia?
Nope. That was a little bit of a late one.
Yeah.
Trials of Mana was 95, and Tales of Fantasia was 96. But this game had its physical cartridge release in 2000.
Oh, it's a Fire Emblem game.
It sure is. It's
It's
Fire
a
Emblem.
It's
Fire
Thracia?
Emblem Thracia 776.
It was Thracia.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a Fire
my
Emblem
goodness.
game.
And the craziest thing about the release of Thracia 776 is that it had a digital release before its cartridge release. And it came out on a cartridge in January 2000, but in 1999, it was on a special Super Famicom device called, and I'm not kidding, a Nintendo Power, which is different from the magazine.
Beautiful.
But the Nintendo Power in Japan was basically a cartridge that had something similar to flash memory on it, where you could go to a physical store, put in your Nintendo Power, pay a small amount, and download special games onto it. It had a couple puzzle games, a couple RPGs, a bunch of Nintendo Picross games were available for the Nintendo Power cartridge. But Fire Emblem Thracia 776 was one of the games for the Nintendo Power. But it was popular enough and there was demand enough to have it get a very late physical release on Super Famicom. So that was the last Super Famicom game released on cartridge, January 2000. That sounds a little bit insane by today's standards because, of course, now we would just use the internet for downloadable games. But physical media, downloaded games, I want to know where each of our stances is on this, because it's a really hot topic for some people. I don't know how much you engage with, like, I don't know, video game forums nowadays, or discords, including RPG Fan Zone Discord, but some people care so strongly about physical media that they will only buy in physical media, and some people love the convenience of downloadable things so much that they'll be like me and have a completely unsustainable library across 3 or 4 platforms worth of video games, and they'll never play all of them. So physical media versus download media, nowadays, say 2022 and beyond, are you more likely to get something physical or downloaded if it's a new game that you're interested in?
It really depends on the platform for me, because I tend to do it on PlayStation, because, well, actually it almost doesn't matter because they're do physical, because like they still take up storage space and I'm always running out of space. On Switch, I almost do all digital, because I'm like, well, what if I want this with me and I don't want to carry cartridges around? So it really depends. So, but since I play a lot of Switch, I guess I lean more towards digital these days, unless it's a game that I like really, really want a physical copy of. But that's where I am these days, because I don't want to keep storing these things on my shelf.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really a collector, but I do like to have things. I'm surrounded by far too many books and movies right now. So I tend to buy physical. Like, I prefer physical unless there's just like a much better deal on something digitally. And then at that point, I'm like, all right, I'll buy it digitally. But I guess for me, I like to have it. I like to be able to look at it. I like to know that no one's going to be able to take it from me. So I generally prefer physical, but it's not like that big a deal for me at this point.
Yeah, I tend to go digital just for the space concerns. I got a big old family. I don't need the chance of those getting damaged. And the big thing for me is the fact that it used to be, physical was good because, there was no way to get rid of it. If you had the game, you had the game. Nowadays, with like day 0 patches and all of the updates that come along, there's a decent chance the physical game you get isn't going to be beatable if it's, or be playable if you don't have that day 0 patch. So if they take it off the store, you might as well be out of luck anyways with the physical. So I think it's good for collectors. Collectors still get a lot of value out of physical, but I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, space is an issue for me too. I live in like a tiny little apartment. And yeah, it really, similarly to Mike, like it kind of depends on the developer or the publisher. Like, if it's something like Xenoblade or most Nintendo first party games or like Final Fantasy 16, I'm gonna go out and get the box because that's a game I want. But like, say it's like, I don't know, similar to Zach, I suppose, if there's a really good deal, or it's an indie RPG, or it's something else that I just want and is either not been released physically, or the physical edition is limited edition only, like limited run games or something, then I'm like, I don't need to sit in a queue and like buy an extra box for my shelf. Like, I'm not like fussy about it, pretty much. Like, I've grown up and lost a lot of physical media in my life just because of trying to make back money and things like that. I make it sound really bad, but like, just through like needing to sell things to make space or to make money and things like that. So I've never really had the time to get attached to things. But I do feel a bit weird, like, being in the industry and everyone's like, oh, I've still got my NES. And I'm like, no, I don't. And it's like, I don't have any of my the oldest console I have is a PS2. And I have a GameCube that I bought on day one. It's still the same one from like 21 years ago or 20 years ago. But yeah, I'm really not like fussed about collecting or physical media unless I really, really want something. But it's also the fact that like nowadays physical media for old stuff is so expensive as well. Like, if I want a copy of, say, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, I've got to shell out like $80 for it or whatever. And it's like, it's pretty discouraging. So like, even for historical re-releases and that, as much as I'd rather have the box, if you're going to do it digitally, please, I'll do it, take it that way, because I'd rather have the game than have the box, if that makes sense. So yeah, but I also don't know whether this like digital revolution, for lack of a better term, is actually affecting like physical media prices or anything like that. I know that's like a totally separate argument, but also like I think that also influences my decision to like skip out on like limited editions, physical editions, or like, oh, have you ever played Metroid Prime 3? Oh, it's you can only get it for £100. And I'm like, yeah, no, until they release it digitally or re-release it, no.
Right.
I'm a little bit in the middle of this because for a while I did value physical media a lot, especially since I have that collector instinct in me. But I increasingly am valuing the lack of clutter and the convenience of digital over physical. And like Alana, I care much more about having the game available to me than having it in a physical form. And I'm really past my days of getting collector's editions anymore, because if you want to talk about just physical media taking up a lot of space, it's the collector boxes that really take up the most. So I still get most things physically if it's a new game that I know I want, because I have enough space that it's not insane for me to put something else on the shelf, or something in a case and then it's boxed in another box in my basement. But I'm fine with if digital is the best option, or if something's on sale digitally and not physically. And but I would feel better about it if the big game companies made their catalogs more available digitally. Like I mean, games like Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, you should be able to get that on Switch for $30, right? Like, or less than $30. I just made up a
Nintendo
number.
are going to give it to you at $50, and they're not going to give it to you for any less.
That's correct. But if Nintendo came out with like a Paper Mario Thousand Year Door Super Paper Mario Collection on Switch, I would blow 80 on that probably, because like these catalogs are valuable, and they're starting to become like impossible to find. So I really value game preservation, and for that reason I don't want to abandon physical media. But I think that the game companies could do a better job of making their digital libraries more available and more comprehensive. And then that I think is what's most important. Just like make games that people want to play available for people to play. And they aren't quite 100% where I wish they were on that front.
No, I agree with that. Especially like Sony recently with the PS Plus tiers. Like, how many classic games have they released on that top tier? Like, not many. And in Europe in particular, they're all like the 50 hertz versions.
I think there is room for improvement there, because
right.
these tiers are pretty new. But still, I would like to see that library fill out in a major way.
Yeah, me too. But like, I think it's interesting, like really quickly going back to like the Nintendo Power, the digital thing, like with the Satellaview as well. Like,
that's right.
Japan have had multiple different ways to play games digitally for a lot longer than we have. So it's interesting that we didn't like jump onto that as quickly. And now it's like pretty much the predominant way of like buying games, although physical media is still pretty popular. And one of the things I always find really interesting on my like end is like Nintendo don't publish their digital sales figures. So it's really hard to like gauge a game's popularity sometimes, because you see like their physical media and it's like this far up sales charts or whatever, and you're like, huh, and then there's like an asterisk and it's like there's no digital sales on this, and I'm like, why are you not including that? Like, it feels yeah, no, they publish them on like their quarterly reports, but but it's like for their individual weekly or monthlies, no. You have to go on the eShop chart to see, but you can't tell how much it's sold. There's just a weird like other end of the scale kind of thing, like how Nintendo are also like a little bit backwards with this in particular. So yeah.
Well, all right. Thank you for that discussion on physical versus digital media. That topic can get pretty heated in certain corners of the internet, but I'm glad we're all able to, have a nice civilized discussion about it. But let's move on to another civilized discussion. Back to the top of the order again. Wes, pick another category from the list.
I think I got to be the one to pick Switzerland. I'm too curious. I can't wait for it anymore.
That question is not quite as exciting as you were hoping, I fear, but
I got to say Switzerland on an RPG podcast. So
you sure did. I don't. Does Switzerland have much of an indie dev scene? I really don't know about that.
Not really. I don't
Um,
think. Apologies to any Swiss game developers if you are. Please shout about your games.
I would love to hear about Swiss developed games, but that's not the topic of this question. All right. Why is the 16th century Swiss philosopher and doctor Paracelsus important to RPGs?
Enjoy, everybody.
Wow.
I feel like I should know this.
If you just throw out some ideas, and I'll give hints, because you know I love giving hints and I love writing quiz questions. So bring it.
I don't even know where to start with this.
I'll go. Your first hint is that Paracelsus was also a pioneering alchemist.
Was he searching for ways to attack and dethrone God?
You know, I don't know, and I wish that was part of the historical record somewhere.
Like we're talking like potions here, chemistry,
Not potions.
In general. Came up with the word cure or heal. I don't know.
No. But you're not a million miles away. Like cure and heal are both spells a lot of the time, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Discovered the
Oh.
Phoenix
Or
Stone.
magic.
Oh, black magic. Yeah.
No. But
No.
what is something that you can often ascribe to spells or things in RPGs?
Elements?
Elemental. Yeah.
All right.
This is now you're in the right ballpark. Now the idea of the cardinal elements is way predates Paracelsus. So that goes back to ancient Greek times or even way earlier. But Paracelsus did have an idea about elementals or elements that is very, very RPG.
I'm just sort of the idea of weaknesses and strengths against other ones.
No.
Did he invent the weapon triangle?
No. Oh, you're gonna be so annoyed when you hear the answer. But should I come up with this is gonna give the answer away. Should I come up with the 4 words that he came up with, or that he adapted from folklore?
Talking like
Do it
fire,
one by
ice, wind. What are we talking here?
We're talking Sylph, Undine,
Ah!
Gnome, and Salamander.
Ah!
Because Paracelsus's theory was that the 4 cardinal elements were governed by invisible spirits.
Oh, for
he
God's
came
sake.
he came up with elemental spirits and or personifications of elements or elementals. And Salamander, Undine, Gnome, Sylph are used in the Mana series and the Tales of series, which were taken right from his works. And we probably wouldn't have the idea of elemental summons or elemental spirits without Paracelsus. Yeah, the discussion here is, did you catch these recent FF16 trailers? Like,
Ugh. Yes.
a lot of them are extremely about summoning and elemental summons. And I mean, I mentioned Tales of and Mana earlier. I just think elemental summons and spirits are cool, and when games revolve around them or feature them heavily, I usually like it a lot. Like I love Final Fantasy summoners, for example, and just I mean, I even like the elemental army in Heroes of Might and Magic 3. But so what are our thoughts on elemental summons, elemental spirits? What do we think of Final Fantasy 16 featuring them so heavily? What you got?
I was just gonna say I can't imagine anyone. I don't understand how someone can watch that trailer for Final Fantasy 16 and not be super hyped, unless you are like the dyed in the wool. I want my turn-based back kind of person. Like these summons and like these giant kaiju fights, like it looks incredible. It looks so fun. So I like summons too. I think back to like Final Fantasy 7 and how much I enjoyed those at the time. Not so much now, but just because those cutscenes are so long. But I think that they're like one of my favorite parts about RPGs.
Right? I mean, how excited were you when like you summoned Knights of the Round and you got like a minute and a half cutscene for the first time and you did so much damage, and now I'm just like, well, I'll just go make a cup of coffee right now while it's doing it. Like that's the thing. But yeah, like summons are like probably one of my favorite elements of RPGs. I'm always a little bit sad at series that don't feature them, but they obviously make sense. Like Trails doesn't really have elemental associations with spirits. But Tales does, Final Fantasy does. Actually, Star Ocean doesn't either. I'm trying to think of other ones that do. Plenty of them do, basically. Mana does as well. And they just add a little bit of personality to those elements and to the game, really. I think Tales probably does them the best, although I think my favorite iterations of summons ever is probably Final Fantasy X. I think that the whole summon system in that game is really brilliant. And the way that it's incorporated into the plot is really brilliant. And because you really kind of get to know those summons. And of course, you can name all the Aeons as well. So there's like a real attachment to it as well. There's a reason for that, which I won't, it's a 21-year-old game, but I won't say why. But yeah, I think they're always really fun. And I love how it's one of, I think in Final Fantasy in particular, like it's really cool to see how they've changed over time as well. So like seeing Shiva in Final Fantasy 3 for the first time to seeing Shiva in Final Fantasy 16 is like the coolest thing ever. And like to jump off of what Zach said, like if you watch that trailer and you're not excited, like I feel like if you want turn-based Final Fantasy and you watch that trailer, like, yeah, I'm surprised that punching another summon in the face as a summon does not override that like disappointment of it's not turn-based. It's like, but you can punch Garuda in the face, like as Ifrit. Come on.
I mean, like Shiva, Ifrit, and Bahamut are so indelible to Final Fantasy, and like summons are always big, powerful, dramatic, flashy. So many adjectives I could say about them. But my very first RPG was Final Fantasy IV, and I remember like every time you would find a new summon, it felt like it felt special because summons were like the biggest, coolest spells in the game, and I think that's why I like elemental summons and spirits in a lot of games, is because they always feel it feels like getting a new spell or a new weapon, but with like an element of fantasy that isn't really in other kinds of media. You know what I mean? Like summoning elemental spirits is such a video game thing that I mean I can hardly think of it happening somewhere else besides related media like a tabletop RPG.
Right.
But it's yeah, I think that summons are just dope, and I gotta thank Paracelsus for perhaps planting the first seed of that.
Yeah. I like them, especially when they're actually like really relevant. Like I also started with the Final Fantasy IV, and in that game, like you meet them and you talk to them, and like they're actually really part of the story, especially as they relate to one of the characters. And like going to Final Fantasy VI later, as much as I love 6, it's very different in 6. Some of them are part of the plot, and some you just like pick up. And then Final Fantasy 7 does that too. But when they're really like part of the game and in the story and they're actual characters, I just think that's really cool. Like, so that's one of the things that I'm excited about with 16. And actually, I mean, even 15 did that. I mean, we don't need to get into 15, but like they were really a vital part of that world. So they actually felt like they mattered, unlike some of the characters.
I recently played Final Fantasy 13 for the first time, and the summons in that game aren't exactly important to the plot.
No.
But, and they're sort of weird in their execution. But I got to admit that the first couple cutscenes with them are really, really cool.
Those summon animations are really incredible still.
Yeah. I mean, I was aware of them before playing it over the summer, but I definitely really experienced them like in front of my eyes in game for the first time, and they were so cool that I wish there were more of them or that they were more part of the plot. But it looks like that FF16 is really making summons and summoners and elemental spirits very important, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree. 15 is weird though, because like you can only summon some of them in certain situations, and it's like you're making them out to be really important, and certain ones are important, but also the most important ones you never get to summon for plot reasons.
Yeah. Gameplay wise, not as helpful, but narratively they're interesting. Yeah.
14 also does it really interestingly as well. Like the oh my god, what the? I just played this yesterday.
Primals?
Primals, thank you.
Gotcha.
The primals are an interesting interpretation, but also like the summoner class, which is like a really strange way of doing it. Like initially, like, you could only summon like these like icon versions, and when you hit 70, you can summon this like mini Bahamut, but it's pretty big Bahamut, and it's like, oh, now I feel like a real summoner. And then you hit 80 and it's like, oh, now I can summon Phoenix. And now it's, when you hit 90, you can actually summon Ifrit, Garuda, and Titan. And like, they feels like that like the excitement from that alone, without retooling that job as much as they did, is also very cool. Like, it really taps into like, oh, everybody loves summoning summons, and now you can finally do it when you hit level 90. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a little weird. In FF14, I mean, I think maybe all four of you have played FF14 more than I have, but like the early going of Summoner really feels like you're casting like ruin and poison spells with a little spirit floating next to you. But then they really started buying more into the fantasy of summoning Bahamut and Phoenix in the later levels, and I think probably for the best, because now summoners are about big and cool summons and less about, keeping up your DOTs.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's enough about Swiss 16th century philosophers. It is your turn, Zach, to pick another category.
I'm gonna have to go podcast.
And this is probably not surprising, but this question is about Retro Encounter. What is the most downloaded Retro Encounter episode? With the understanding that our current our current client for Retro Encounter has only really been counting for the past 2.5 years or so. So this is not it's not going to be anything before 2020.
I'm gonna guess top 10 PS1 RPGs. Is that post
That is incorrect, but you are so close.
So top 10 SNES RPGs then.
Or maybe PS2.
It's the PS2 one. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's top 10
that's
PS2
awesome.
RPGs. Now again, because it only started counting in early 2020, this skews very heavily to the last 2 years. But the top most downloaded episode is top 10 PS2 RPGs. Other ones in the top 5 were are the recent Essential 10 episodes, the Game Boy Advance episode, the year in review episodes for 2021 and 2020. And a few other things, but a few other things like top 10s and lists and broader topics usually have more downloads than game specific ones. The most downloaded game specific episode is our Final Fantasy VII remake spoiler cast. With the other ones in the top 5 were Tactics Ogre, Baten Kaitos, Skies of Arcadia, and Near Replicant.
Oh God, I'm so sorry, everybody. That's like 2 ones I hosted.
And I was only in 3 of those, and you were in 4. So yeah, Alana, you're the winner here.
Oh God.
But that just, I think, goes along to, I think, how listeners interact with Retro Encounter. We have many listeners that have been listening for years or subscribe to the podcast and listen every week. But a lot of the time, it's people doing searches on Spotify or iTunes, which are by far our 2 biggest podcatchers, with iTunes slightly behind Spotify. They're looking for a specific topic, and they're looking for a topic that's more accessible to them. So not everyone has played Baten Kaitos, but Baten Kaitos, so they're more likely to listen to a top 10 episode. But people that want to hear a Baten Kaitos podcast will search for one and then find ours, because there aren't a ton of Baten Kaitos podcasts out there. So if I wanted to do Retro Encounter and only go for the maximum audience possible, I would give clickbaity titles, things like listicles, or best of episodes, and then when I did the game specific one, it would be the ones that have a large underserved audience. So yeah, I'm not gonna do that. I'm still gonna run Retro Encounter basically how I like to run it, with a lot of internal polling of RPG fan staff, a lot of stuff going on our ideas board, occasionally a public poll for input like that. Answering people's questions as much as I can in Twitter and Discord. But what are your thoughts on this? Like, does this mean I should do more top 10 episodes? Or should I do more weird RPGs that other people haven't podcasted or done videos on? Or, I don't know, should I just take this under advisement and then just do another Dragon Quest and another Suikoden in 2023?
I mean, it's funny because, as like the features manager for RPG Fan, I have these kinds of thoughts all the time, right? Like what sorts of things do we want to run? We want to run things that are like highly specific and like maybe more interesting to me personally, or like we just posted pretty recently, like the top 25 360 and PS3 RPGs, and I think there's space for all of it. And I know that if we wanted to generate more traffic, like every time we do like a top 10 whatever, that's going to be some of our biggest hits. And we sometimes will adjust even like the titles of things to make them more, I don't know, we'll say clickable instead of clickbait. So it's a hard thing for me. I always think it's kind of a cheap win, but it is a win, and it's content that people are interested in, right? So if people want to read it, then that's important. But we also have our own principles as an outlet, and I think they're similar to yours, right? And so to me, the way you're doing it now is great, but I understand the question.
And I should say I also appreciate that Zach and Mike, both of you, definitely have access to the Retro Encounter stats, and thank you for not just looking those up and giving me the answer straight away.
I mean, I was looking it up after we guessed the right thing, because I'm like, oh, I want to see what the other ones are now. But yeah, I was not going to cheat. So I think there's room for both. I think the top 10, they're very different too, like in terms of like what we do on the site. It's like here's a list, it's published, but then having an episode about it is just very different, because there's like this live discussion back and forth. So I like that we have both. I think they're well worth listening to, and it's important that people want to listen to them. But also for us, just because we've been around for so long, we have so much retro coverage, and a lot of people really do come to us for that. So whether they're obscure or just old, or if they're old and obscure, I think that definitely draws people too. So maybe that's why the PS2 one like really resonate with people, because it hits both of those. Even though I hate describing PS2 games as old, they are sort of at this point. So that gets to the retro stuff and the list stuff.
And I didn't really mention this before, but the PS2 era seems to be a bit of a sweet spot for our audience. That is, I think at least two of the games that I mentioned were high rating Game Journal episodes are from around that time. And I think they always do numbers when we cover stuff of that era. Zach, you would probably know better than I do.
You kind of catch like a variety of audiences with PS2 era, right? Like even as someone who like started playing RPGs when I was very young, and I'm like 37 now, I was still in high school when the PS2 came out, right? So like and sort of that older audience and RPG fan starts right around the same time that the PS2 starts, a little bit before, but it's similar timing wise. And so you've got those people, but also the younger people who are either on staff or are into RPGs. They might have had a PS2 when they were younger than me, like when they were like 5 or 6. And so I think that it ends up catching both audiences, and you're not losing the older crowd who maybe are playing fewer RPGs now because, like, I don't know, they have a family and things to take care of. And you're also catching that younger crowd who are still, maybe in their 20s now and grew up with the PS2.
Yeah, if you forgive me for using words I don't love using, the PS2 probably does bridge the gap between millennials and Gen Zers.
No, I think it's totally true. I agree. I mean, I my students obviously are Gen Z, and like a lot of them had GameCubes or PS2s when they were really young, so it makes sense.
But for me, the PS2 and GameCube were my the consoles of my teenage years, so it makes sense. Wes or Alana, do you have ideas for how I should change the podcast to get a larger audience?
I think it should all be listicles from now on. Top 10 lists for everything, nonstop.
Got it. All right.
Oh.
So how many top 10 Yakuza games can I make?
You can do that. So
yeah, top 10 mini games, top 10 side characters.
Perfect.
Top 10 energy drinks.
Top 10 Majimas.
So I mean, you had just like you could just go back and retitle your vending machine feature the top 10 vending machines in RPGs. Like, yeah, and like to twist it a little bit around, because one, I don't think you should change what you're doing. I think like a variety of both is great because that's what you need to do. Unfortunately, as a site and a podcast and as somebody who works for an outlet who does lean into clickable more often, and I'm really sorry I introduced that into your vocabulary, Zach. Yeah, you sort of have to do a bit of both, and I always want to write things with a more interesting headline, like some of the stuff that I used to do at RPG Fan, like just tell you straight up what it is with a colon, da da da. Like, this is the game, this is the topic, or this is the quote, this is the topic with the game in there. But sometimes you do have to twist it a little bit. With articles in particular, I don't think you need to do that with game journals. But lists are always going to draw people because people love opinions and people love agreeing and disagreeing with opinions. So when there's a list of top 10 RPGs and their favorite one isn't at number 1, they are going to have an opinion and they're going to listen to the episode out and then just go, I don't agree with that. But that was a great discussion, maybe. That's like one example.
We got a very rude comment a little while ago.
It's one of my favorites.
I have bore witness to this. Don't worry.
they're not always a thoughtful discussion when their favorite game is not in our top 10 games episodes.
What did somebody say? We didn't include The Witcher 3 in our essential 10, so immediately we became a joke on iTunes.
The one I was thinking of was about Baldur's Gate, but you're very close.
Joke's on them. I was always a joke.
My favorite was on the 360 PS3 feature recently. Someone commented, I don't like this list because Xenoblade's not on it. I was like, wait.
It's like, it's
so what?
Also,
that would be also very, like, if you threw the Wii into that discussion, that would be very unfair to, like, no offense to, like, all the other games, but Xenoblade is, like, apart from Mass Effect, probably, and Persona 5, I guess. Like, yeah, Xenoblade is very, very, very much above a lot of that generation's caliber.
Sadly. Xenoblade is my favorite Wii game by a huge long shot.
Yeah.
But the tone of that whole article would have changed if we included the Wii, because I mean, like, even when the Wii was brand new, like, Sony and Microsoft execs were saying, "Oh yeah, we think you should get a Wii as your second console after ours," because they were really competing with each other and not the Wii.
Right.
It was, and the Wii was such a weird phenomenon. Like, that whole console generation lasted 8 or 9 years instead of the typical 5, and the Wii was a downgrade in power, but like did so many unique and creative things, and was marketed so well that it dominated that generation in sales. It's a great article, the PS and the PS3 360 article, and listeners, you should all read it. But the Wii is not represented somewhat deliberately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it was that, you know, we've done so many of those for other consoles, and at some point we talked about PS3, where, like, there's really no sense in running PS3 and Xbox 360 as completely separate features because there's so much overlap. But there wouldn't be with the Wii. Like, actually, we should do a Wii one at some point.
Yeah, I remember there was a weird phenomenon very early in the Wii U's tenure, that, like, they had a bunch of ports of 360 and PS3 games in the early Wii U, including Mass Effect, and I think some Assassin's Creed games.
Yeah.
Mass Effect 3's got its own version, hasn't it?
So I think the answer here is just keep doing what you're doing, because like my last little thing here is that if you want to look at my thing I keep thinking of the last few months is, like, if you wonder, like, what people come to RPG Fan for, is that when Xenoblade Chronicles 3 came out, I think it was a day or two after it released, someone sent something through our contact form and said, "Hey, like, are you guys going to review this?" And, you know, well, it's one of those games, like, we didn't get it in advance, and, like, we couldn't have it on day one. So, like, but there were people who were like, they really want a review of this game that has been out for, like, a few hours. So we have that side. We have people who
did my
want
best,
that.
I promise.
And no, you were great. But it's like, I look at that, I'm like, okay, so people really do want to come here for current content. And then, like, 2 months later, we post a review of the first Suikoden game on PS1, and there was a time period in that month where it did so much traffic that it actually had more readers than the front page of the site, which I've never seen before.
That's really cool.
So, I mean, it's great, but, like, basically you have to do both, because yeah,
and to, like, go to the PS2 argument, and I guess apologies because I was like 8 years old when the PS2 came out, so I know, but I love my GameCube a tiny bit more just because it has a few weirder ones like Bat and Kaitos. But I think that that now, because that console and because that generation is like 20 years old, like there is more nostalgia for it than ever, and like arguably like a lot more discussion seems to be taking place online about GameCube and the PS2 and the original Xbox, because the original Xbox didn't have a lot of RPGs on it, right? They had Jade Empire and it had
and
some other
and KOTOR
and KOTOR and some BioWare, like early BioWare basically, and Fable and other things. But like there's a real nostalgia for that particular generation, and like someone was telling me the other day, like what's the best like starting or Christmas lineup or holiday season lineup, and the PlayStation 2's like 2001 Christmas lineup was something like Final Fantasy X, GTA 3, Devil May Cry, something else. I'm like, Jesus Christ! I'm like,
Wow.
these are like all timers still. I'm like, so the PS2, like as much as the PS1 was like revolutionary, the PS2 is still like one of the best selling consoles of all time, and it totally makes sense to me that
I
like
think it's still number one if you
Yeah,
don't
it
if
is.
you don't count handhelds like the DS.
yeah, I don't even think the DS has overtaken it in Japan at least.
Oh,
Maybe.
really? I thought the DS was ahead, but its numbers are insane. That is definitely true.
Yeah, so yeah, there's just such a rightful nostalgia for that generation. And the PS2's got so many RPGs on it. Like so many weird ones as well. Like you've got like your normal ones like Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, but then you've got like Ephemeral Fantasia or Steambot Chronicles, hi Marcos, and Shadow Hearts and Wicked Ends and your Wild Arms and yeah.
One of the strongest lineups of RPGs of all time, which
Oh,
you can hear all about in our what console is the best for RPGs tournament that we did a couple of years ago. Those were fun episodes to record.
they will.
But all right, thank you so much for this podcast theory crafting discussion that I have had with all of you at one point or another in some form. But the answer really is I'm gonna continue making Retro Encounter how I like to make it, which is some retro content, some more modern content, some listicles or broader content, some ultra specific content. It's going to be what what me and the RPG fan staff want to make for the most part. And I mean, I'm making it sound like I run I run the podcast like a dictator, and to a degree that's true, and to a degree that's a little unfair. But I mean, I ultimately decide what episodes happen, so I guess it is true. But Alana, now it's your turn to be a dictator. What's the next category we're going with?
I think we all need a little bit of soul in our lives right now.
Alrighty.
I'm scared this is about Dark Souls, in which case, oops.
Oh, it is.
Yay! I know nothing.
It's not as scary as that though. Every From Software game that has swords in it has a weapon called the Moonlight Sword or Moonlight Greatsword or similar, dating all the way back to Kingsfield and Armored Core, except for one. What is that exception?
Oh my god. Okay.
It's not as hard as you think it is. It's a game.
I'm just gonna guess Demon Souls just because you played it recently.
Nope. I actually I know where the Great Sword of Moonlight is in that game, but it's too hard because I have to do a certain level and get it up to light level 3 and then defeat a boss, and nope, I can't get that sword, sadly.
I was gonna say I know nothing about From, but can you even switch weapons in Sekiro?
You are correct. It is Sekiro.
Ah.
And the reason that it's not in there, and they even addressed this in an interview at one point, which I thought was amusing, because like having a sword called Moonlight is a FromSoft tradition. Even there's even like mech in Armored Core, there are Moonlight laser swords in that game.
Oh, that was going to be my answer.
But in Sekiro, because they wanted the game to be just about the katana combat. I think there are multiple swords in that game, but they didn't, like, a Moonlight Sword didn't really fit what they wanted to do. So they decided not to have it in there. But Sekiro is also unusual among FromSoft games because there's no RPG fan review for it. We decided it wasn't quite RPG enough because it's a game that has a lot of stealth combat in it and a lot of sort of counter parry action combat in it. With little in the way of gaining levels or RPG mechanics. There's also a grappling hook that lets you zoom from place to place, back and forth, which is a change from the other Souls-likes. Like, there's even debate on whether Sekiro should be considered a Souls-like. But otherwise, it does have a lot of Souls-like ideas, especially about like the about just being a game with a lot of danger and like finding the location where you died to reclaim some of the resources you lost. It's a very very well beloved game by FromSoft fans, but RPG Fan doesn't cover it, and Rob Steinman has been bugging me to play it, along with many other Souls games for the past year or two. But here's the discussion I wanted to have, and I'm wondering if I'm just going crazy. I like samurai stuff a lot. Like I've seen, I don't know, 7 or 8 Akira Kurosawa films at least. But the past 5 years or so, we've had Ghost of Tsushima, the Like a Dragon Ishin's coming out soon. We've had Neo 1 and 2. We've had Rise of the Ronin just get announced. Sekiro's coming out. Like even if you throw out all the Koei Samurai games, of which there are dozens, like we feel like it feels like that we are just suddenly surrounded by samurai games. And I'm even more surprisingly, I haven't played any of them yet, but suddenly I have a samurai smorgasbord to choose from. Am I crazy, or is there just a lot of samurai happening right now?
There's an Onimusha anime coming out as well.
Onimusha's coming back. Holy
yeah,
moly.
there you go. I will get some facts for you. Carry on.
But it is the Onimusha anime bringing back why can't I think of his name? Jean Reno. You guys remember there's unexplicitly,
no.
for no reason at all. They brought in the coolest French actor of all time for Onimusha 3, and I still don't understand why.
But
Because it was awesome.
Yes, but I don't think so. But Takeshi Miike is directing.
I mean, why am I not surprised?
Right, exactly. So there you go. No, you're not going crazy. Like, the samurai everywhere. And it's kind of cool, but also, like, a little bit like, oh, wow, we're really having, like, a game, like, every month.
A couple episodes ago of Retro Encounter, Peter Triesenberg and I had a discussion of maybe making a podcast called the Takeshi Miikast. Just to do about his weird horror and surrealism and his samurai movies and his video game adaptations. That guy's a madman. But I like samurai stuff a lot. I've had an eye on Ghost of Tsushima forever. I didn't know I liked Souls games until recently. So Sekiro and Neo really weren't on my radar, but they are now. Naturally, I'm interested in the Like a Dragon game. Rise of the Ronin is by Tecmo Koei, so it's like the Team Ninja Gaiden people, but making an open world samurai game that's going to be less fantasy influenced than Neo is, but a lot of it sounds really cool. I mean, I think I'm going to start Elden Ring soon, and I might use katanas in that game instead. I don't know.
You know, we get these floods of different types of games. You know, years and years ago, zombies were in absolutely everything. They added zombies modes to everything. More recently, we've seen Battle Royale and everything. Right now, I think we're on the cusp of we're going to either lean towards space horror or samurai, or maybe we'll just kind of have a little bit of both, since that's a pretty divided crowd.
Yes. Give us some cyberpunk Ronin.
Oh my god,
Let's do it.
Street samurai up in here.
Yeah, we do have a lot of space horror games right now, like, and horror. Survival horror is coming back in a big way, like Silent Hill 2 remake and Resident Evil 4 remake and 2 more Silent Hill games are all coming, and it's like, oh my god. But like, to back up your point on like samurai stuff as well, there's tons of like samurai classes and samurai jobs in other RPGs, and always have been. Like, you know, 14 again, I guess. Samurai is my main at this point. But like, Octopath Traveler 2's warrior type character, Hikari, is a samurai, and I think that's very cool.
I think it's cool too. I mean, I was looking at which Elden Ring class to start at, like, just a day ago, and samurai jumped out at me a little bit.
Yeah, I think that samurai stories in general are they're a classic sort of trope that we like to come back to, and people have been playing with the idea of samurai for a long time. Like, there's like a French movie in the 60s called Le Samurai. That's really cool.
That has Alain Delon in it, and it's
right.
It's about a hitman, but it's an extremely cool movie. Yes,
right. He has like a code, and there's one with Forrest Whitaker called Ghost Dog, in like the 90s, I think. Anyway, I think that it's a trope that we like. That sort of like a person who's alone with a code. I mean, you could even argue like Omar from The Wire is kind of like a samurai, right? So I think that people really like that, and I think that that trope, just kind of going back to it as being something that's cool in and of itself, makes sense. I mean, like, we're talking about Kiryu. He's always kind of like a samurai, right?
Oh,
Except for now we're going to make it literal. So I think that it just naturally lends itself to it.
Yeah, I think that, and the fact that the character often is fairly honorable, often feels like quite a relatable thing, I would say. So, yeah, but now you just get to have a cool sword. That's what people are really interested in.
Yeah, like like stoic masculinity and swords are both cool. So let's have an entire genre revolve around it and make its way into video games a lot recently. Like again, this is more a shower thought than a trivia question for me. But now that I have a lot of samurai options, I'm gonna play a couple of them hopefully soon. Mostly thinking of like a Dragon Ishin now, which comes out a week before my birthday. Happy birthday to me in 2023.
Perfect.
Yeah. I like Samurai in Final Fantasy V, and also Orin, who's technically a berserker kind of thing, but he's kind of really a samurai.
Yeah, and isn't his moveset Bushido?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. I want to guess Can as well. So yeah.
Oh, that's true. Well, I mean, I really like Samurai and Final Fantasy Tactics because the spells you get from Iaido are real weird and can differentiate between allies and enemies, which is sometimes a problem in that game. But okay, we don't need to get into Final Fantasy Tactics mechanics.
No.
That is, I think episodes 7 through 9 of Retro Encounter, maybe 8 through 10.
Way back there.
Yeah, way back there. But Mike, it is your turn to pick a new topic.
I'm gonna pick. I feel like the right follow up to this is picking Blade, unless that's also like a category I need to throw us off.
No, it isn't really. It is about a different kind of blade than you're thinking, though. And there's a reason that in my list here it appears next to a different question. What do Final Fantasy VI and Xenoblade Chronicles Cross have in common?
Mechs.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, but you need to be more specific.
What do you mean more specific? You ride mechs.
Correct, but I want it to be more specific.
Magical mechs?
No, I don't want to give it away right yet. But you guys have the right idea so far.
Is it something to do with like the origin of the mechs?
Yes.
Well, shoot. Maybe I didn't play. I might not have played enough of the story in Cross to know. I spent all my time doing side quests.
No, it doesn't have to do with the story of either game.
Oh, okay.
Oh my god. Yes, actually, I'm an idiot. I know this. Tetsuya Takahashi don't have to design both of them. Yeah.
Yep, Tetsuya Takahashi designed Magitech armor and all of the mechs for the Xenoblade games.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's Tetsuya Takahashi was an artist with Square for many, many years. He designed monsters, for the most part, in Final Fantasy V, including Omega. And in Final Fantasy VI, he designed Magitech armor and a lot of enemies. And originally, his pitch for Xenogears was an idea for Final Fantasy VII that he did with his writing partner. But it was rejected for what ended up being Tetsuya Nomura's pitch. And when Xenogears got a far, far lower budget than Final Fantasy VII, Takahashi realized that unless he was on the mainline Final Fantasy games, he would never get to make the projects he wanted. So even though Xenogears did get made, he left Square to found Monolith Soft not long after Xenogears was finished. And that resulted in the Xenosaga games, the Xenoblade games, and several others. His wife, Soraya Saga, was also a writer and designer on his projects with Monolith Soft. So, just as a coincidence, we're starting up a month of Xeno very, very soon. I think this is already available on social media, but Xenosaga Episode 1 is going to be our Game Journal game for December. And we're doing a Xenoblade 3 spoiler cast also in December. So there's going to be a lot of Xenosaga and Xenoblade in Retro Encounter very soon. But I thought it was sort of a pretty amazing thread that the designer of the Magitech armor in Final Fantasy VI is still making mechs in video games today.
I mean, he loved them. Like, Takahashi and the team, like, when they came up with the idea for Xenoblade Chronicles, like, their pitch was literally like, the Bionis and the Mechonis figurines that they spent time modeling, and they used like development teams to like try and get the shapes right, like the poses. Like they used to pose them, and then they would like pose the models in that way. And their pitch was literally just to show Nintendo these figures. They didn't have an idea about what the game was. It was just these two models, and they were like, "We want to make a game on these." And like and even like the developer, like the project lead at the time, was like, "Do you have any more than that?" And he was like, "No." And he was really surprised. So like it was like these just two, it's a bit more of that. It's like a pretty vague detail, but like yeah, like Takahashi is a big mech fan, obviously, and Monolith Soft do a pretty good job of it. I think I'm glad that they're like more prominent in Xenoblade 3, and they're pretty prominent in 2 as well. Like 1 is a weird deals with them in a weird way, and 3 does too, in a very cool way though, I would say. But yeah, Takahashi's like career is ridiculous. Like even before Monolith even like Xenogears, he worked on Final Fantasy 4, he worked on Chrono Trigger, he worked on all sorts of things. It's like he worked at Falcom too, didn't he, for a little bit, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was before his time with Square, but
Yeah.
he was an artist and art director for
Mhm.
multiple game projects for quite a while. Xenogears was really sort of his first game where he was like the in a project lead role, and is probably the game with Square that he's most associated with. And when I framed that question, I specifically chose Xenoblade Chronicles Cross to compare to FF6 because I really wanted to draw attention to the mechs you're riding, and there's a lot of mech design and mech riding in Chronicles Cross.
Mhm.
Again, the one Wii U game that I think still needs a Switch port more than any other.
100%.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think that without Takahashi, Final Fantasy would look a little different because I mean, Final Fantasy got less fantasy and more sci-fi steampunk in the '90s, and a lot of that is because of robot designs from Takahashi. Like he's one of the secret architects of what Final Fantasy would end up looking like.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, and then of course, the Magitech armor also appears in 14, and there's a lot of that. Like that
Oh yes,
that look and feel like is defined like the whole like empire. So like he obviously indirectly influenced some major portions of 14 as well.
yeah. You get a free Magitech armor mount when you beat the game, the Realm Reborn storyline for the first time, and for a while when I didn't have any cool mounts, I used that I used that ride a lot.
Yep.
Now I have a true Griffin though, and I don't want to ride anything else. That's a really cool Griffin. All right, so that we are 2/3 done with the lineup of questions right now. So we're back to the top of the order again. Wes, pick a category from the remaining 4.
I'm gonna make like Dora the Explorer and choose map.
All right.
That's all I've got, folks.
As a mapping professional, I had a lot of fun researching this question. What RPG has the largest world map in video game history?
Specifically an RPG, or
It is believed to be the largest map in video game history, but it is also an RPG.
I mean, I guess it's going to be Elden Ring.
No,
I guess it would be Cross. Xenoblade Chronicles Cross.
also incorrect, but Elden Ring does have 4 letters in common with the answer.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Oh,
This is an Elder Scrolls game, right?
It is. Do you
Oh.
know which one though?
oh, it's got to be. It's
Skyrim?
got to be Skyrim, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not.
It's
Skyrim.
Oblivion.
Also,
Morrowind?
okay, Oblivion's map is smaller than Skyrim's.
What?
Or Oblivion, excuse me, Morrowind is not the right answer. I'll just give it to you. Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall's map is stupid.
What?
It's
Amazing.
it is 62,000 square miles, which is only a little bit smaller than the entire island of Great Britain. It has over 15,000 towns, 5 different kinds of biomes, dungeons and towns randomly distributed at times, and every NPC character in it has a specific alignment and faction they belong to, but it is generally randomly generated, which is mostly to its detriment. Like Elder Scrolls 2 is not nearly as beloved as the Elder Scrolls games from Morrowind onward, in part because this map is so huge and vast and hard to find anything that feels crafted or unique or interesting. And also like if you're ever curious about the best way to play Daggerfall nowadays, it is free on Bethesda's website. You can if you go to Bethesda Softworks' website, you can find a Windows version of the game pretty easily. But here's where my thoughts go. Like, how important is vastness in an RPG map? Because I think that when it's done well, it's really awesome. But if something feels empty or boring, then I lose interest in it really quickly. Which
Right.
which is another way of saying that when a map feels huge and awesome and but also not boring, I think that's an almost impossible balance to strike. Like it makes games like Breath of the Wild or Elden Ring all the more impressive for pulling it off. So I mean, Alana, you and I have a certain map that we both love. Skies of Arcadia's world map is just wonderful. But I just posing a question to the panel, like what's a world map that you just adore, and is it because it's detailed or vast or both or neither?
All right, so I'm going to go for something different and something that recently got released in English. Maybe not necessarily because it doesn't have a world map, and not because it's a world, but I guess it's part of a bigger RPG world. Trails from Zero is set in one state, and most of the game is set in one city. So I guess Lemuria as a whole is a really interesting world, but there is something really impressive about an RPG, I think, that can set its entire game in the walls of like one location and still make it interesting. Like, I don't think it's ever the size of the world map that is important to me. It's how involving and enriching and how like the population of that world like integrates into it and how like interacts with you basically. So again, on the other end of the scale, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 world is like, I don't think it's as impressive as 2s or 1s for different reasons, but I think it's impressive in other ways, mostly because of the people who live in it, right? I know I'm diverting from the question a little bit here, but I think that Crossbell in particular is such a cool place because you have to go, you become so familiar with it. Like, it's a big city and a big state, but you know where everything is, like, immediately. And so you feel like you've been living in that city for as long as Lloyd and Randy and Ellie and Tio have been as well. So it's like the other end of the scale for me. It's like probably one of the most recent examples I can think of like an RPG world in inverted commas that I really love. So I guess I'm sorry, I'm like twisted your question a little bit there.
No,
but
no, it's fine. Like you didn't really twist it. Like you are valuing the details and the intimacy of the Crossbell maps in a way that like maybe you wouldn't feel that kind of intimacy in a map that's really huge. For my version of that answer is Kamurocho in the Like a Dragon slash Yakuza games. Like, because you go back to Kamurocho in all of them except for the ones that take place in samurai times, it feels like you're visiting the old neighborhood, and you can see how it's changed in small ways over the years, but you still know where everything is. And you, like, when you pass by the ruins of the of the brothel that's destroyed in Yakuza 1, like you remember what happened there. It's not Kamurocho and any of the maps in the Yakuza games, frankly, aren't that huge, but like you get a feel for the town like you've been living there in a way that you cannot feel at all for something like Hyrule.
Right. And like, to stretch out the Trails thing a little bit more, like, if you've played Trails in the Sky and or Cold Steel, you're also like fleshing out Zemuria even more, right? So like, you hear mentions of Crossbell in one game, and then you're in Crossbell and you're like, oh, like, you're recontextualizing stuff. So it works in like twofold for Trails most of the time.
And we've been hearing about Calvard for over a decade now.
Oh, I'm so ready.
Yeah, and we're finally getting Calvard games coming our way in the next
Probably
couple of years.
2024, probably, yeah.
Yeah, either 24 or 25, depending on it. But they're really releasing them in a hurry, though, which is surprising to me. Because we got 2 announced in 2023 already.
We got 3. Nayuta's coming in English as well, 100%. We don't know.
I forgot Nayuta, but that's sort of the Gaiden chapter, though.
Yeah, apparently some characters are in Kuro.
Really?
or
Oh,
some
wow.
involvement
No,
potentially.
no, it's within the canon, but it's not
Yeah.
like it's not like one of the numbered ones.
No, that's right. Yeah.
But Wes, Zach, or Mike, do we have any things that we love about RPG maps?
So vastness has always been kind of almost always a detriment to me. Sometimes it can be done really well, but I'd much rather have a nice focused experience than something that goes to feel big. And oftentimes I just kind of run out of gas at some point. I have yet to beat a Xenoblade game that I didn't take a giant break in the middle of. Like in some cases, like a decade long break before finishing the first game. But what I really love is when it can still feel like it's this big exploration. Like Earthbound is one of my absolute favorites. And it doesn't have like a big overworld map, but each of the locations feels so unique and distinct. Each of the towns that you go to has its own identity. And there's travel between each one that also feels unique. You go through different kinds of biomes that transition from, one town that you're at to the next. And it gives this really good impression of like you're really spanning the world. You're exploring all these different kinds of places, but none of the exploration ever takes so long that it wears you down. You're not like going and searching for lost stuff quite so much as you're trying to get from one place to another, and that really makes me feel okay. This still feels like exploration, but you can kind of fake it because I don't have to explore so much that I lose the plot in between two different places.
The only Xenoblade game I've really put hard time into is Xenoblade 1, and I did finish it, but that game is exhausting. There are like everything in it is so big, and there are so many side quests that I like. It's a great RPG, but it sometimes vastness for the sake of vastness can be overwhelming or exhausting, and I definitely feel that. But again, like when it's done right, like if a game creates a sense of scale but still feels fun and detailed, that's the ideal. But it very very seldomly hits that ideal, I've found, which is part of why I'm so eager to play more Souls games, because everyone has told me about like how great the open world and or interconnected designs of Dark Souls 1 and 3 and Elden Ring are.
It's interesting because for me, a lot of times I'm with Wes. Like I see like a big vast world and I'm like, oh my gosh, how long is this game going to take me? And like I know I have some like completionist tendencies, and so I know that like if I look at it, I'm like, oh, this is going to be frustrating. So like I tried to play Elden Ring the other week and I died 12 times in an hour. So that was problem number one. But problem number two was like I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've only walked like 3 feet. And I know how many feet there are in the game, right? And so when I think about something like Xenoblade, like it has to have a story and, as Alana was saying, the people that convinces me that it's worth it. So, I actually prefer the zones in Xenoblade 1 because they are actually like significantly smaller and more manageable than Xenoblade 3. But Xenoblade 3 has like a sense of scale, and that's sort of the whole point. But I don't like them as much, and they're not as well designed or as tight, I think. And I even think about like to talk about things that aren't RPGs. Like I really prefer like GTA 4 to GTA 5. And part of the reason for that is that I'm not spending so much time driving between things.
Nico, my cousin.
Exactly.
Oh.
And so I just find myself frustrated sometimes by really, really large open world checklist games. And I know that Elden Ring is not that, but then like I need the checklist because like where am I going? Whereas like I don't like Breath of the Wild as much as a lot of people, and it's because like, oh my gosh, there's just so many places to walk, and like, I don't have any reason to walk there because I don't care. And so like I need something to sort of drive me through those spaces, and then I can kind of like explore on the side along the way.
You need a different mindset for that kind of experience. Like when I again I'm thinking a lot about playing more Souls games, so I won't use that example again. But with Breath of the Wild, like I had to sort of just pick a direction and let things happen, and that was which is against my normal instinct, but I was able to enjoy the game more by embracing the chaos a little bit when I normally prefer a more ordered path, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I just never can get into that.
Now, I'm not sure where I land in the group here. Like, I really like games where I can explore literally for the sake of exploring. So, Breath of the Wild worked for me, but I still want something to do. I think one of the reasons Breath of the Wild works for me is because I could just explore and do whatever, and there really is stuff all over the world. Like there's not just like big open areas of nothing. For the most part, like there's probably a chest or there's a rock you can pick up, just things you can find. So like if there's still something to do or something to see, then I'm all for a world being really big. It's like Final Fantasy 14, like I think there, if you look at some of their expansions from their zone design from expansion to expansion, like I think they've gotten much better over time. Like some of the, like in Heaven's Word, I like the look and feel of the areas. Some of them just take way too long to get around. Sea of Clouds, especially, I don't think is a great
And there aren't
area
enough
design.
Etherite crystals either.
Yeah.
In some of those
That's what I
Heaven's Word
thought of.
areas.
Yeah, and but the thing is too, like there's also like there's so little to do otherwise in some of those zones, which I realize it's an MMO, so like every zone is like technically reserved for something at some point. But so like that kind of thing, if it's a big area, like if I have something to do in it, it bothers me less. If it's a narrative thing, if it's a story thing, or if it's just finding a Korok or something, like I'm okay with that. But I just don't want to be bored. Otherwise, like yes, like when you see like these big expansive areas, like that's great. Like I love that feeling and exploring. But as long as it's not empty, I'm okay with it.
Just put discoveries and bounties in every single world map, and I'm happy. There you go.
You can't see me, but I'm nodding along to that. Correct.
Good. I can feel it.
But Mike really got down to it. It's like vastness and scale can be impressive. Just don't make it boring. And I'm afraid that Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall can get pretty boring, which is why it's available for free on the Bethesda Softworks website.
Amazing.
But let's see. Zach, we only have 3 more to choose from. Pick the next category.
I'm going to go with something that I don't know as much about as probably a lot of people here, which is Falcom.
All right. You don't need to know a lot about Falcom to guess the answer to this one. Ys 1 was not the first action RPG, and it was not the first Falcom RPG, but it was the first what kind of RPG?
Bumper car RPG?
Bumper. Damn it.
I like how we all thought that.
I was just
Lovely.
gonna
Yeah,
say that. Yeah.
I usually like comparing it to lawn mowing or sumo wrestling, but I understand that it's not what I was looking for, though.
Okay.
Oh my!
I guess it sort of has like a top-down view. Is that what we're talking?
Well,
I don't
no,
know.
I mean it was a year after Zelda, so it wouldn't exactly be that.
Is it system related? Like the platform it came out on?
Yes and no. Not exactly.
That's
that it has
nonsense.
anime cutscenes. I don't know.
System related is close.
But it's got to be like the first RPG on that system, which my brain is not remembering. It's not the Amiga, or is it?
No, it wasn't the Amiga.
The Turbo Graphics, right?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Well, it had a turbo. Okay, should I just say it because you're really closer than you realize.
We're all dancing around it.
It was the first RPG to receive a full remake. It came out for the MSX and some other consoles at first. Then it had an NES version that made a few interface changes, but was ultimately not as good. But then TurboGrafx, the '89 version of Ys 1 and 2, was the first full RPG remake.
I'm gonna say it's the first package, isn't it? As well,
Yeah.
really. Yeah.
And there were remakes of other games before this, mostly arcade to console ports, including the original Mario Brothers. The one with with little buzz beetles, not Super Mario Brothers 1.
Yeah.
But eventually remaking games is RPGs maybe in particular just became a way of life. Each of the first 4 Dragon Quest games were remade for the Super Famicom and for the PlayStation. And now, I mean, we've already mentioned remakes of Nier Replicant and Final Fantasy VII and other games in this very episode. I mean, I am willing to bet that each of us has played a remake of something in the past 6 months. Right?
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
And I mean, just on Retro Encounter, I mean, I mentioned FF7 and Replicant already, but We did a whole episode on the Trials of Mana remake. Everyone played Live Alive a couple months ago for the
Mm-hmm.
podcast on the remade version. Like remakes are now a highlight, or at least part of the video game release cycle. And every year we're excited about what is the next RPG remake that we can play next, whether it's a game that was unavailable before or is hard to get now or could use some improvements and the remake is welcome. There's a certain Suikoden 1 and 2 remake package that I think all five of
Yeah.
us are probably interested in.
Yep.
So, what do y'all think about all these remakes?
I mean, I know sometimes people get grumpy about them. It's like, oh, make original content. But people are still making original content. You know what I mean? Like I think about Suikoden, like Eden Chronicles coming out, and it's not a remake, obviously, but it is a spiritual successor. But Suikoden 1, like, how could anybody be upset that that thing exists? So I'm always happy about remakes and remasters. I understand that people want people to do different things, but like if it's available on a more modern console, or if you are doing something interesting with it, which Final Fantasy VII Remake, even though I have criticisms of it, is certainly doing something interesting with it. I think it's pretty much always good. I have no problem with it.
I think a lot of I don't want to like spend time like talking about like people who don't like the remakes, but I think a lot of people miss the fact that when a game gets remade, the original one does not cease to exist, and you can still play it. But in the case of like we talked about what like way earlier in the show, like there's so many games that you can't get anymore. So if a remake means people can play it again, and I think that's a great idea. And even people that are like, well, I don't want a remake of this. Like I want to play it on my PS1. I still have it. And it's like, yeah, but like not everyone did. Like the people we talked about earlier that how they started with like PlayStation 2 when they were a kid or whatever, like literally never had these things earlier. And now they're into gaming and all that. And like there's so many things that you cannot get anymore. So I think it's great for, if only for preservation, that you can still play these in some format. So I'm all for it. I know the Chrono Cross, I don't want to call it a remake, but I know it isn't perfect, but I'm glad that it's at least out there and available on all these consoles, because there was really not a great way of playing that game for a while, especially when the PS Store went away.
And what is a remaster versus what is a remake? Isn't that a discussion I'm interested in having?
No.
But the but generally speaking, when remakes like fix a problem that a game had, or make a game more accessible, or or make it available to an audience for the first time, like Live Alive or the upcoming Like a Dragon Ishin, I almost always support it. And I hate to pick on an RPG fan staff member who's not here, but Tom is one of our youngest people on staff, and he had not heard of Live Alive before its remake happened earlier this summer, but he enthusiastically dove into it and played a game that's older than he is. Because this remake was made available to a wide audience, and like remakes allowing younger fans or fans or late coming fans, like allowing them to enjoy and discover something is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's worth lauding anytime these classics are available to people who haven't been able to experience them before. Yeah, sometimes we get ones that have questionable quality. A lot of times it's targeting a mobile release and then not changing enough away from the mobile release when you hit different platforms. I don't know how anyone can complain about making these more widely available.
Right.
That's just lovely.
And actually, not even just age. And I'm sorry, Alana, if you were going to say this, and I'll probably let you elaborate, but there was definitely a period like in the 90s and stuff where a lot of these things did not come out in parts of the world like Europe. Like you guys missed out on so many games back then that just never came out there, and now all this stuff does. So I think that's also important. So it's not even always an age thing, it's just a region thing.
Right. There are like some weird remakes I can think of, which I guess again this is more of a port or whatever. Like Xenoblade Chronicles 3D on the new 3DS was
Oh,
weird.
right.
That was a weird port,
Yeah.
but there's a port, right? But like I was just thinking actually when you were saying that, Mike, Terra Enigma would be such a good game to get a remake because you never got it in America. It's like, use the Live Alive formula, which I think Live Alive is not only like the best example of HD 2D, but I think it's one of the best like remakes for being faithful and also like just tweaking things here and there just enough to make it still feel like a Super Nintendo RPG, but also feel like something that could have been made this year or last year even. Like it just, but it feels like fresh anyway in its own way. But yeah, like if we're going to talk about remakes that have remakes of games that we've already had access to, so Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII remake, and gosh, what is another remake? My brain keeps thinking of The Last of Us and The Last of Us Part 1, but that's a kind of a negative way because that is a strange one. Like it's a remake of a game that came out 5 to 10 years ago that was also available as a remaster on a previous platform. So that I can understand from that angle. I think there has to be more of a reason to it. Like Nier is a little bit older than that Last of Us, but it makes more sense because we got a westernized version of it that was buggy and they fixed a lot of those problems and also gave us the vision that Yoko Taro and Kavia and everybody else came up with in the first place. So we got like, and it got like a lot of missing content re-added. So although they didn't call that a remake either, it was like between a remaster and a remake, but like it's Yoko Taro telling me to go and have a beer with him. It's like the same kind of sentiment I have. But yeah, I love remakes if they're like doing good things and giving us things that, updating things for a new audience. I certainly think that there's a lot of games I never played that I would love to play, and if they got remastered or remade, I would absolutely jump at the chance. Like Valkyrie Profile Lenneth's getting that PSP port on PS5 at some point, and I'm going to pick that up, even if I have the PSP version. But, it's another way to play it. So it's like, just keep giving me the old stuff. I'm always happy to see remakes, basically, as long as they feel justified, I think. And I can't think of many reasons where they wouldn't be justified, because, like we've already said, the original still exists 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and I think that is an important point. Like, a remake does not unmake the original version. I am very grateful for the remakes of Yakuza's 1 through 5 available on PS4. Even though that a lot of them had major changes made, they even removed a LGBT phobic side story in I think 1 or 2 of the Yakuza games. And in one case there was an actor who had fallen from grace somewhat, so he had his entire likeness and voice role replaced by another actor, and then that's not the Judgment one. I'm talking about the Yakuza 4 one. Sometimes remakes do make major changes that could affect someone's perception of a game, but a lot of the time it's not making it worse. It's and it doesn't undo the original. So the reason I made this question about remakes come up was because I just noticed that when I'm doing my top 5 or top 8 list of the year or something, like, remakes are always on it, just because they're a normal part of the video game release cycle now. And most of the time when a remake of something I'm interested pops up, I'm interested and grateful to play it. Or if it's something I've already played before, like the Trials of Mana remake in 2020, I was just excited to experience an old favorite in a new way. So yeah, I wasn't trying to like accuse anyone of being anti-remake. I don't think any of you took it that way.
No.
No.
I just think it's sort of weird how video games are so used to remakes when that's much less the case in other media. Even though there's a lot of movie remakes, there's probably even more video game remakes. But we're not going to remake this discussion anymore. Alana, we have only 2 left, so you don't have much to choose from. So what's the next question going to be?
I think we'll get Monster done and obviously walk into the maybe clear Monster Hunter question.
You know what? It's a monster that you're much more familiar with.
Oh.
Other than appearing in many of the same games, what do the Pokemon Tauros, Heracross, Mr. Mime, Kangaskhan, and Tropius have in common?
Oh, shoot.
I'll say those 5 again. Tauros, Heracross, Mr. Mime, Kangaskhan, and Tropius.
Is it about Pokemon Go and how they're only available in different regions of the world?
Each of them is exclusive to a specific continent.
Jesus Christ.
Tauros
I
is
would have gotten
Wow.
that.
Tauros is only North America.
Which one plays North?
Yeah, Heracross is only South and Central America. Mr. Mime is only Western Europe. Kangaskhan's only available in Australia, and Tropius is only available in Africa, except for a few special events where they swarm or have a raid or something. I don't know exactly how Pokemon Go works.
It is a
Yep.
raid, yeah.
I have most of those now, but only after several years because it's very rare that they ever make those available in different regions. Like when I got a Kangaskhan, I'm like, oh, this is exciting.
Yeah, over 40 Pokemon in Pokemon Go are region exclusive. Some of them,
Jesus.
like Solrock and Lunatone, are each available in half of the world. Like they each is available in a different hemisphere. Some of them are extremely specific to regions. There's a couple that are only in Japan or specific pockets of the world. When I first learned about these, it was a long time ago. Where I think it was in the Rio Olympics in 2016, where a Japanese gold medal gymnast tried to play Pokemon Go to get, maybe it was a Heracross, to get something that he couldn't get in Japan, to catch a Pokemon he couldn't catch in Japan, and he ended up running up thousands of dollars worth of data bills because of how terrible the the infrastructure of data in Brazil is. But I'm just wondering, like, is this okay? Like, is continent or region exclusivity okay? If it encourages people to travel, that's at least interesting. But if it excludes people that can't travel from content in a game, that doesn't seem fair to me. Like,
Yeah.
No.
I mean, we don't like DLC being too expensive. The price of a plane ticket to get a single Pokemon feels a little excessive.
I'm going to stretch this out a little bit for the Pokemon Company and Game Freak in general. I still think it's stupid that they do two separate versions and lock Pokemon behind games. I know that trading is way more like easy nowadays, but it's just like so obviously like Pokemon Legends Arceus sold really well despite only having one version. Why do we need to like split them between two different games like nowadays? And I feel like the Pokemon Company in general has many things that I have criticisms of. And this feels like, especially with how rare the events are, I think it's pretty bad, honestly. If the events were like every 4 months, then maybe I'd be okay. But I don't know. Like, I think like if you want to go traveling, just go traveling. But I also feel like I would not get on a plane ticket to just go and get Tropius, right? Like that would be strange. But I'm sure people have done that, and I'm not judging anyone who has done that.
I mostly remember Tropius as being very useful for being able to take on 6 HMs in the Gen 3 games.
Right? Yep. Of course I'm going to use it as my fly machine.
Yeah, it's my fly, cut, strength, and I don't know, probably I think it could do all of them except for surf and waterfall, I remember.
Right. I think region exclusivity in general is like we were talking about like games that didn't come out in certain regions and things like that, and I think it's just frustrating in general. Like, do you remember Vivillon, Gen 6 Butterfly, that had a different like design depending on where it came from? So like if it came from like Australia, it would have a different pattern on its wings, and America and South America and Asia and Japan and China and India and every like certain parts of Africa. Like there were like 18 different designs for it, which is a cool way of doing it, I suppose. But yeah, it's
that's
like,
cool because it's not
Yeah.
locking people out of getting the Pokemon.
Right.
It's just visual interest.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of the element of having Pokemon having separate versions since 1996, but that's sort of related. Like, I think that we've probably, forgive me for using this verb, evolved beyond needing two versions of a Pokemon game. Because it's really just locking pieces of content away from people and requiring them to play a second game to access it. I'm not against Pokemon having special events, but I wish that there was less. It was just less a burden on the consumer. and traveling between different continents seemed like a particularly unfair way of doing it. When I first heard about this, I thought I was a little bit incredulous. 'Cause
Right, and I think another example is like special event codes as well are so uncommon, and a lot of times for like Sword and Shield, say, like there'll be a GameStop and certain retailers, but people might not have a GameStop near them, so they can't go and get it unless somebody goes to get it for them and gives them the piece of paper. Right? It's like there's such a weird like special mysticism around certain types of like certain like areas of Pokemon that I just think it's a little silly like
yeah,
at this point.
I remember the only way to get a Mew in Red Blue was to go to Toys R Us on like a special weekend
Yeah.
until people figured out the glitch for it.
It
But
was cool then because you had like magazines and things like that, but at the same time, there's still like a level of access to it because magazines aren't cheap, right?
yeah, no,
Like,
but then it was brand new, and like the idea of versioning into red and blue or green, if in Japan, was also pretty new. But I think now the way to do it would just be to use the mystery gift system, hey, for the next 14 days, if you press the mystery gift button, you'll unlock a quest to catch, I don't know, Shaman. That seems okay to me. But having like special events that could inhibit people's enjoyment of a game, that are travel sensitive or require a major purchase that's limited. I wish there was less of that in Pokemon. Like I'll never I have a I'll never get a Mew in Let's Go Eevee because I think those Pokeballs like cost $400 on Amazon now.
what? Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes it less special to me. It's like putting it behind like 4 different walls, and I'm like, okay, I obviously don't need it if you're going to make me go to that much effort to get it. You know what I mean? Like, maybe
Yeah.
that's very like antithetical to it, but also it's just kind of like, well, if you're not going to make it like reasonable, then okay, that's fine. It means I can check it off my list as a not to worry.
I think there's a way to make things like regional Pokemon feel special without being as exclusive as they have been in the past.
Well, the real problem, like I have more to say about it than this, but like the real thing with Go is that you can only trade locally. If you could
Yeah.
trade with your friends online, like none of that would matter. It's like cool, like I have a friend in Japan, and then they can't get this, and I can't get this. Like that would solve it. That would solve really all of those issues, I think. But yeah, I think it's weird. Like I have a handful of them in Go, especially from like Gen 1, Gen 2, because those are the ones that are available, but they're always adding more. Like they added what's the bird? Oricorio?
Oh yes, Oricorio.
Earlier this year, and it has 4 forms, and each one is
Mhm.
exclusive to a different part of the world. Ours, of course, is the like the yellow cheerleader one, which is like funny. But the other ones I think are way cooler. Like I want the purple one, I want the red one, but I can't get them. So I don't know. I think it's strange. If they did more of the events, then that would be fine. You know, they had Go Fest over the summer, and during Go Fest, you could encounter some of them, like Kangaskhan and some other ones. And that's also how that was the first time they had Shaman in the game. So like that's fine. It's kind of weird that you have these, a game in part about collecting and like filling out your Pokedex, and there's little medals and stuff in the game, and it's like just I have all these little holes in there. It's like, okay, I would love a Chatot. It's a little musical bird, but it's exclusive to, I think, South America or something. And that's it. Like I've never seen it available anywhere else. But again, if you could just trade, because you can trade online with the other Pokemon games, I don't think it would be as big a deal. Although I really think the solution would be, now that there's so many, as the newer games get released, they keep introducing regional forms. Like, why not just have regional forms be maybe exclusive? So like you don't have this Pokemon in your Pokedex that you can never get. You're just like, well, I have this one, I just can't get this version. Like that would be a little better, I think. Not perfect, but a little better.
Oh, okay, Mike. I think we've talked about Pokemon regionality enough, but you are up for the last category selection. It's called Massive, and are you ready for the question?
Yeah, I'm gonna pick Massive.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Good. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
Now seems like a simple question. What online RPG has the most registered users?
Oh,
I'm guessing it's still WoW. I'm
WoW
guessing.
has about 120 million
Yeah.
registered users. It is not the right
not
answer.
active players though.
Correct. Registered users, not active players.
Ooh, okay. It's not something we're thinking about. It's probably something that is inexplicably still around that no one's heard of in a long time.
That's Star Wars MMO.
No,
EverQuest 2.
It's
RuneScape.
I was gonna say EverQuest, but
none of those is the right answer. This one's a little unfair. Is it okay if I just give it to you? WoW has about 120 million registered users. Final Fantasy 14 has about 40 million. But the Chinese game Western Journey,
yeah,
I'm sorry, Westward Journey has
Oh, dear.
330 million.
Oh my god.
that checks out actually. Yeah.
And also, like, this question is an indirect way of just talking about the Chinese game market, which fascinates me to no end. There's a Chinese game that is the most popular online game called Honor of Kings, is the most popular mobile game in the world. It's similar to League of Legends or Dota 2. It has revenue in the billions every year, but it's barely present in the West. And Crossfire, which is a shooter similar to Counter-Strike, has somewhere between 600 million and 1 billion registered users. It's the most it's the most played video game in the world by some measures. But the crazy thing is, like, it's very unlikely that any of the five of us has played Westward Journey or Crossfire or Honor of Kings. And that's because the Chinese market is somewhat isolated, but just enormous. Like, there are so many people that play video games in China, but there was a ban of all video game consoles in China until recently. And a lot of the playing in China is done in public arcades or or net cafes. And there isn't a lot of, like, individual ownership of high-end machines among the large populace. They did not have access to RPGs that we would consider as, like, foundational console RPGs for a long time. And a very famous Taiwanese RPG called Legend of Sword and Fairy has had 7 or 8 iterations since the early 90s. But the Western world is getting Legend of Sword and Fairy 7 as the first worldwide release of that series. We got it earlier this year with a physical version coming next year. So I just wanted to pose the question, or the topic idea. What do we think of the Chinese market? Like, there is decades of game development history over there that we're only just starting to see bits and pieces of now that the Great Firewall, as it were, has broken down a little bit. And China is accepting more Western and Japanese-made video games, and we're seeing more Chinese-made video games leaving their somewhat insular environment. So is anyone as curious as I am about Legend of Sword and Fairy and other Chinese games?
Sword and Fairy looks good. The one you talked about, 7, I've always had an eye on it. I think one of the more unfortunate sides of that is that the English localization is pretty terrible. Like, it's not good. Like, it's like a passable at best translation, which is always a shame. But like you were saying, like, the console ban only just recently lifted. Like, the Switch has really only recently just been released there, but people have ways of playing things outside. Like, people are playing and streaming Splatoon in China, Splatoon 3, even though it's not out there. It's a really strange dynamic. Well, at least to us, like, that's completely normal to people who live in China.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you think that game or film piracy is normal here, it's beyond normal over there. It's practically a way of life for fans over there.
Right. It's sadly not really anything I've dug into, mostly just for lack of trying to dig into it, really. Sword and Fairy I was aware of before even 7 got localized. I have heard of that MMO, and I'm absolutely not surprised at those numbers, nor at the numbers of the Counter-Strike, like, because, yeah, like, the population of China is, like, vastly more than we could, like, ever imagine, or have it, like, situate over here. But Yeah, I'm interested, and I haven't really dug into it, and yeah, just more apologies because I don't know. I haven't really made the time to look into it myself.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of Chinese-made RPGs with reviews on RPG Fan. It looks like we did get a code for Legend of Sword and Fairy 7. That's floating around on our assignments board, but because I don't think I've ever played a game from this region, it makes me really curious about it. Like, but I'm also just intellectually curious about video games from other parts of the world. Like, I don't know if you remember the game Legacy of the Coriodan. That was like that was I think one of the very first RPGs made in Africa.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that game a little while ago. Oh shoot, I know we all talked about it before.
Chris Tales.
Chris Tales, right, from Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in that. And there's a Metroidvania game that just finished its Kickstarter campaign recently called Mandragora that is made in Hungary. And just because these games are made in Colombia or Hungary or Africa makes me more interested in them because they're a region of the world that I've never visited, and I want to know what kind of, and these people have played RPGs and are inspired by RPGs I probably have played. I just find that so fascinating. So there is a real danger that I will impulse buy Legend of Sword and Fairy 7, bad translation or no, sometime in the next several months.
Oh yeah, definitely wasn't for like discouraging. I'm sure that like as we get more of these like international developed games and things that like interest in them will grow and the market will grow as a result. Like, you know, you only have to look at like how many books we've read or are available from different countries or films that are directed and produced in different countries and see how those mediums have grown as a result and how rich those mediums have gotten as a result from having media from all around the world. But it's interesting how a lot of the narrative people assume is still like English, white speaking, Western, developed Western stuff. In some ways, like it's absolutely not true. Like if you do any basic like film or literature research, you know that like a lot of the richness of those mediums comes from all sorts of different countries. And I hope that video games goes the same way as well. I also think a lot of the video game market in general, consumers have a lot of negativity towards China as well. Like you
Oh
often,
yeah.
it's pretty terrible to see, especially like people interacting with like Tencent and anything like that. And there are some companies that absolutely do, you know, throw money around and buy out other companies. You know, like didn't the former Yakuza guy just go over to one of the Chinese companies?
Yeah,
Correct.
correct. The founder, the creator of Yakuza,
Yeah.
who also was the lead producer of Daytona USA and Super Monkey Ball and other stuff. He joined a new studio founded by NetEase, which is
That's right.
a Chinese tech giant.
Right, yeah. But yeah, I don't really want to like drill down onto the like bigger conglomerates in those countries, but more like the smaller companies, like how we're getting smaller indie developers, like even Ukrainian developers who are making video games like as best as they can in the midst of what's going on, and you've got like the Corridon, the one you spoke about earlier, and Crease Tales, and plenty of other things. But also, we as a Western in the Western world also need to start making games more available in more languages. I would say, like on the flip side, like we need to employ in localization and stuff like that to make sure that our games are accessible. Like there are some, talking about ports and remakes earlier. What just got remade recently or ported recently? I don't remember. It might have been Trails from Zero that got its first English release, but also like it got releases in like Chinese, simplified Chinese, French, German, Spanish, Italian, all sorts of things. And it's like we also need to like give that accessibility back in a way, I suppose, to everyone. Chinese is difficult, but yeah.
That Hungarian game I mentioned a little while ago, when I was checking out its Kickstarter page, it even made a point to say it was going to be available in 11 languages at launch, and
Yeah.
I just thought that was so cool. Like I want to play games from all over the world and see as many perspectives as I can, because this is the hobby that I'm most invested in, and I just like hearing like seeing stuff from all around the world. I should mention that one of the games I mentioned, Honor of Kings, they had that mobile game that's the most popular mobile game in the world. They are making an effort to have it get a worldwide release this year. I think they're already sort of rolling it out, as it were. And this is speculation, but a lot of people are saying that the only reason that's happening at all is because Genshin Impact made a huge impact
Mm-hmm.
over the past several years, and that is a Chinese made game.
Yeah.
That even has some controversy because you're not allowed to say some things in that game that are banned by the Chinese media,
Oh yeah.
like any mention of the Hong Kong protests or Taiwan as a sovereign state. Like those are two reasons that Alana mentioned that maybe people aren't very favorable towards Chinese made things recently. I guess it's like China's relationship with video games is a little fraught, but I'm just really interested, and I wasn't kidding when I said I might try to check out Legend of Sword and Fairy sooner rather than later, even if it's a pirated version of one of the '90s ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Order reviewed the most recent one, so you should go check it out. When it came back out on consoles last year, it's a second port this one, so yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe it was like a PC only before, but I definitely saw a 2023 PS4 release, physical release.
I don't specifically know a lot about the Chinese market either, but everything else we talked about, like the worldwide and different developers, I think I just wanted to chime in and also say how much I enjoy that. Like all these online game festivals we've been, having the last several years, like I've learned so much about different developers, like all these tiny, even like 1 or 2 person teams from, countries that you never associate with like game development. And you didn't hear about them before, even if I'm sure they were out there, maybe they were just making small PC games, but you wouldn't have seen them at E3 or any big thing. So all these online events have let them, like, you get to see these people now and see all these games from these really interesting backgrounds. And actually, I checked the schedule too. Like when this episode goes up is the same day, or at least the same week at the very least, that the day of the devs presentation is happening, which is another like big collection presentation of like indie devs. And I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of there too, from all around the world.
But yeah, like the Chinese market is something that we almost never think about as all five of us being from the West, but it's so huge that I think it's maybe not a mistake to ignore it, but it's a little weird to so easily ignore it. That is all 12 questions that I prepared today. Thank you all 4 of you, Wes, Zach, Alana, Mike, for indulging me and going through all these questions. I said there was going to be no winner, but no, the real winner is Alana. Thank you so much for being on your first Retro Encounter episode in over 6 months. It was a joy to talk to you again, Alana.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me come back for 350.
I did specifically reach out to you because I thought that it would be really fun to talk to you again, and thank you for being so generous with your time. But that's also true of Wes, Zach, and Mike. Thanks so much for sharing the 350th episode of Retro with me. That's 350 is a lot of episodes. We've been on the air for right around 7.5 years. It's been a long time since May of 2015. But now we're 350 deep.
I mean, no, I appreciate being here.
Wouldn't have missed it.
But I said there was only 12 questions. That was a little bit of a lie. I have one final question for each of you, so we can take turns answering. And give me your answer and also maybe a 1 or 2 sentence explainer. The question is, what is an RPG you would like to see played for Retro Encounter in 2023? And we'll go down the same order that we were using before, starting with you, Wes.
Well, I had to pick what is, in my opinion, maybe the best, certainly the best JRPG on the Xbox 360. I've got to go with Lost Odyssey.
That was almost my choice, but then I was like, I bet Wes is going to pick
that. You knew it. Well, not only is it, a project put together by a lot of the former heads of Final Fantasy, it's also got a lot of the crew from Shadow Hearts working on the battle system, so it kind of combines 2 very great loves. But it's, a lot of people call it, the real FF13, which is something I take some umbrage with, but it is really evocative of classic Final Fantasy in a more modern age. And the dreams integrated throughout there are just beautiful pieces of writing.
All right, now Zach, what is your choice for this question?
I'm going to go a little more retro and say Breath of Fire 2,
Ooh.
which is a game that I'm not actually entirely sure I want to replay because of the random encounter rate in that game is atrocious. But, when I was a kid, I remember really, really loving Breath of Fire 2. It was the first game that I played where like religion was like being like in some ways like heavily criticized, and I know now it's like everyone's like God's the bad guy in every JRPG, and I know that was not the first game, but it was the first one where it really connected with me. I remember liking the story a lot, and just really getting into it. I've played it a bunch of times, and I'd love to go back to it. I think maybe.
I also have hesitation about going back to that game, but I think it is available on the Switch Online Pass.
Sure is, I
Yes.
It
think.
is.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Yeah, I've been
that
playing
would,
it on there.
yeah, so
In fact.
that would be a much easier way to play it than to find a working Super Nintendo. So yeah, good on Capcom for making that available to a modern audience, like we've mentioned for something like 3 or 4 of those 12 questions. But Alana, what is your choice for a game you would like to play in 2023 for Retro Encounter?
Oh, well, this is kind of the second mention of Shadow Hearts, but specifically Shadow Hearts from the New World, the third game, or the fourth game in the wider Shadow Hearts series, I suppose. So I picked Shadow Hearts Covenant as my very first anniversary game episode, and we managed to play it because it won that poll. So this is partly me going, hey, look, I'm back. Let's pick another Shadow Hearts game. And this rounds out the main trilogy, Kudelka, notwithstanding. One day it will come on the show at some point. But also because I replayed it a year or two after replaying Covenant for like the fourth time, and actually I didn't like it the first time I played it, but on the replay, I actually saw like all the improvements it made over Covenant. I still don't like the story as much, but I think the battle system is better. I think Mal the cat is wonderful. I think Ricardo is wonderful. I think it has some really fun, stupid ideas. And I think it's a really interesting game to discuss given Shadowheart's weird timey-wimey timeline, especially given like 1 and 2 and how disconnected 3 is in some ways from that narrative, but also like has some links. So I think it would be really fun given that, Penny Blood is fully funded, or we should have a look and see how the Shadowheart series ended.
Now, Alana, it's funny that you mentioned Penny Blood, which is, the recent Kickstarter successor. Mike, what's your answer for a 2023 game we might want to play for Retro Encounter?
Mine was Wild Arms, because that is a game I've been really wanting to get through for a long time, and I've had way too many false starts. I started on the PlayStation, and then I got the downloadable, like the PlayStation Store version. I played it on my PSP for a while, and I've always gotten a few hours in, and then I get caught up like customizing my menu icons and just sitting there drawing for hours. And then I know I've played past that, but like point is like it's a pretty, at least to me, it's a pretty important early PS1 RPG, and I'd really like to go through and actually finish it because I really like the vibe and how interesting it is, and of course the music too. So that's one of those ones I have to rectify.
All right, and it's my turn. Listeners, maybe you've noticed that I have a recent fascination with Souls games. I played Sultan Sanctuary for the podcast in March. Then, while I was on break, I played the original, the remake of Demon Souls on my PS5. I want to get into the Souls games. I'm really close, so I'm gonna try and make an excuse to do that in 2023 and suggest that we play Bloodborne.
Yeah.
The action heavy gothic blood soaked action RPG with a lot of cool weapons, a lot of grotesque enemies, but some action that is really really intriguing and compelling to me. So my choice is Bloodborne. And why did I use the term choice rather than answer? That's because all 5 of these games are going to be on a poll that I'm going to keep up for around 10 days following the release of this episode. So our choices are Lost Odyssey, Breath of Fire 2, Shadow Hearts from the New World, Wild Arms, and Bloodborne. You, the listeners, will be voting on these games over the next 10 days, and the winner of that poll will be a Retro Encounter Game Journal double episode sometime in 2023. Probably not January. I'm going to see exactly how it fits into the schedule, but the winner of that poll will have 2 episodes, and I will suffer through it, even if it is a Capcom RPG from my youth that I sometimes have stress dreams thinking about.
That is a killer list.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can I just say, like, how impressive is it that we all managed to pick a game from a different generation?
Yeah.
Like a different console gen. All
Oh,
5
shoot.
of us.
Are you right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you are.
PS4,
Holy crap,
PS2,
you're right.
Xbox 360, PS1, and Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That was unintentional on my part. But yeah, so we have a pretty wide variety of genres and tones and consoles to choose from. But we will arrive to a conclusion sometime in mid-November, and and that winner will have 2 episodes in 2023. But let's talk about the nearer future than 2023. We're at the very beginning of November right now, and the rest of November is going to be full of Mass Effect. We had one of our questions be about Mass Effect earlier this episode, but we're having 3 dedicated episodes on Mass Effects 1, 2, and 3 coming in November. Wes, you and I are both on those, and at the time we've recorded the Mass Effect 1 and 2 episodes yet, but not the third one. I am going to start that game very, very soon, so get ready for some eager Slack messages in the coming weeks.
Cannot wait.
I have not engaged with any of the Mass Effect 3 DLC or really played it at all since 2012, so I am super interested to see how it holds up and what was added since I last tried it. But also coming later in Retro Encounter, we mentioned this earlier this episode, but we're doing a spoiler cast on Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which, Zach, you helped run.
That's true. Yes, and Alana was there as well.
Excellent. As well as we're doing 2 episodes on Xenosaga Episode 1, Will to Power, but spoken in German, and I'm not going to attempt a German pronunciation of anything. And I should also mention, we do have one other episode planned for December. It is maybe our most unhinged episode idea in several years. Jono and I are going to try to recast several popular RPGs with the Muppets. We're gonna just like Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island replaced Bob Cratchit and Captain Smollett with Kermit the Frog. We're gonna try to figure out which Final Fantasy VI character is best replaced by Kermit the Frog. Just by combining Muppets and RPGs, 2 of my passions, into an episode that I have no idea how it's gonna go. But I'm looking forward to see exactly what happens. So if you have listeners, if you have comments for us about Xenoblade or Xenosaga or Mass Effect or the Muppets or I don't know, Switzerland, then please email us, retro@rpgfan.com. You can also comment on RPG Fan's message boards, visit our Facebook page, RPG Fancom on Twitter and Instagram, RPG Fan on Discord. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Twitch channel, something going on almost every day on Twitch. Please interact with RPG Fan however you choose to. We appreciate any interaction or feedback that you can provide. There's also an RPG Fan shop. If you go to rpgfan.com/shop, we have a shop hosted by TeePublic that has shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, phone cases, pins, all manner of RPG branded things, with more to come later. Please, if you are so inclined, visit the RPG Fan shop and buy something to your heart's content. We also have 2 other fine podcasts: Random Encounter, which is bi-weekly and mostly hosted by John O'Logan, and Rhythm Encounter, which is other bi-weekly and mostly hosted by Mike Salbato.
That's me.
What's coming up next in Rhythm Encounter?
We're still finalizing our poll, so like by the time this goes up, our Castlevania episode will have just posted, and we are still deciding on the next 2 episodes.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I love listening to Rhythm Encounter and occasionally being a panelist on Rhythm Encounter. So I'm really looking forward to see how those polls turned out. Which they were internal RPG Fan staff polls, but I definitely voted, and I'm looking forward to the results. But listeners, if you want to review or provide feedback for Retro, Random, or Rhythm Encounter, do so on the podcast listen venue of your choice, be it Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Podcruncher, wherever. We love feedback of all kinds. But if you want to give us feedback as individuals and not as a podcast, let's share our individual social media or contact information with the public, starting with you, Zach.
Probably the best way to reach me is via email, zachw@rpgfan.com. You can also find me on RPG Fans Discord at zachw.
Now, Wes.
You can find me on Twitter at Wes Iliff. Simple as that.
Now, Alana.
I am on Twitter as @Alana Hagues.
Now, Mike.
Best way for me is also email, so it's mike@rpgfan.com.
And now, other Mike. The best way to find me is probably Twitter. I'm at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoca for Dogs at other times, and on RPG Fans Discord, I am Monsoon Mike. So this was episode 350. I need to probably take a break, like puff down 3 or 4 lozenges, and then take a nap. Thank you, good night, and good luck.